Welcome to AUSLAND, Leaders Beyond Borders, the podcast where we learn from the triumphs and trials of international executives. Today we are joined by Dr. Maren Schweizer, CEO of Schweizer World Group. Maren's story is one of bold moves and sharp insights. From soaring the skies as a trained pilot and founding her own aviation business, to leading a multinational turnaround in France, and ultimately steering her family's 175-year-old company through crisis and transformation. Now based in Singapore, Maren leads a dynamic portfolio of 34 companies, blending European heritage with Asian agility, spanning listed firms, scale-ups, and startups across industries from electronics manufacturing to digital platforms. Our host, Michael Maeder, partner at August Leadership, sits down with Maren to unpack lessons in resilience, cross-cultural leadership, and how to navigate both family dynamics and business mandates while building progressive partnerships across continents. Let's dive in.
Welcome to our latest episode of AUSLAND, Leaders Beyond Borders. Today I welcome our special guest, Maren Schweizer, CEO of Schweizer World Group. Hello Maren, it's a real pleasure having you here in Munich with me. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, good to be here, especially in Munich.
Yeah, Munich, beautiful city, huh? We met a few months ago in Singapore during a think tank session, and I think the topic was corporate venturing. And during that session, you made a couple of very sharp and intelligent remarks, and that actually triggered me to welcome you to our show and to have you as our guest. Today, I would like to look at a couple of topics based on your history that I feel are very, very interesting to our audience. Since you have a professional history spanning more than 25 years, you're a trained engineer by roots, and then you did your pilot license, and that also went to your first startup, which was an aviation business. Later on, you turned around a business for a larger multinational in France, and then you started in your family business, right? Where you later became the CEO, up until now in your fourth step, so to speak, in your career, where you run your own investment portfolio company out of Singapore. And I'd like to cover a couple of topics which I've learned from our previous conversations, which I believe is quite juicy and interesting also for our audience. And I'd like to start with my first question. What have been pivotal moments in your career that have shaped the way how you lead business?
That's a very good question, and I think we could spend half an hour about that topic, you know. There are so many who come into my mind as you ask the question. Maybe the essential ones. The first one was in the startup. EBITDA doesn't pay your bills. We've been in constant close to insolvency mode for many, many years until we pivoted the company. That really taught me cash management, cash-to-cash conversion management, cash cycles, working capital implications, everything around cash. And that's still my belief in today what we do. You need to understand cash flow, operating cash flow, free cash flow, and so forth. So that's been the startup experience. Then later on, the MNC experience in France, that's been culture, politics, and how to restructure something that doesn't want to change anything. With very strong unions in France who also have a word to say. And much more than the German unions, actually. And then later on, the next one with my family business, there have been two. The first one has been partnering up with the biggest competitor because there haven't been any other alternatives to survive. And then very much later on is overconfidence kills strategy to a certain extent. And that's my personal responsibility. I believe I was just overconfident with a nice success story out of restructuring. And I failed to manage stakeholders well enough to disagree well.
Yeah, I like that term, disagree well. I mean, that you find the right tonality.
Oh yeah, that's the core of any family business. You know, if you cannot disagree well, there's a lot of failure in family businesses, you know? Because perceptions are different, aspirations are different. And don't forget, there's always the ego between siblings. That's something I didn't get at all for a very long time, that Do your parents prefer one child? Has the one child been the superstar? These are scars who go back in childhood in many family businesses, and then makes disagreeing well so difficult. You know, today in the portfolio company, I do have an advisory board, and we have a family counselor in the advisory board who is teaching us on family dynamics, and that's been very helpful actually.
Oh, that's interesting.
I'm a strong believer in advisory boards, so think tanks. Maybe that's the reason that I showed up at your event and I really liked it. I like think tanks. It's not governance board, it's not decision-making bodies. It's a group of people who challenge each other, who challenge the executives. And in family context, there's the emotional piece of it. And who knows better about emotions, about dynamics, about being the victim, being the persecutor, being the rescuer, if you want to go a little bit into these dynamics, than professionals who counsel families, who counsel relationships, who counsel divorce matters, whatever it might be. It's fantastic because we are having a lot different discussions now in this specific advisory board with the family counselor on board. We would have never talked about. And that's helping us actually to better disagree well.
Okay, very interesting. Now, looking at the fourth phase of your professional life, now running your portfolio, what are sort of your key lessons learned at this stage since you have actually left the family business as a CEO and then moving into running your own portfolio investment company out of Singapore?
Yeah, it all started off with let's build a portfolio without a clear mandate. Today I would need to describe the problem first in a family business context now, because we are still family members in the business, we have our own skin in the game, and it's not us only. Typically we do syndicates with other families, with other investors, join forces, buy, build, or invest into companies, or sell them together. So that's the problem statement. So I think there are multiple dimensions you need to try to distill. What is the money piece? That's probably the easier one to understand. It's pretty obvious. Then there is the emotional piece. And then the third one is the mandate piece. And in the beginning, we've been in a trial error mode when building the portfolio. We all started off on becoming LP in a venture capital fund in Asia. We didn't have a brand to build a portfolio. We thought let's start with venture capital first. 2017, 18, that's been Wild West times for venture capital in emerging markets in ASEAN, all around Singapore. Digital platforms, hype. Valuations up, up, up. You couldn't do anything wrong, actually. The business model is pretty simple. Sometimes I mention, VC is a little bit for dummies. But the business model is pretty simple, at least at that time. It's not today anymore. So we thought okay, fine. To start building the portfolio company, let's start with venture capital in B2C businesses as we do B2B, in the core family business that I had left at that time. So having said that, with a little bit of luck, it worked out pretty well. With B2C businesses in telemedicine and fintech, and some mobility last mile deliveries in Asia, primarily ASEAN. So that's all around Singapore.
Okay, so you basically moved out of your comfort zone, which was in the past more in the business-to-business B2B space, to also move into the B2C space. What was the rationale behind it?
Craziness and curiosity, I would want to say today. And market dynamics. If you look at the underlying market dynamics, let me give you an example. Telemedicine, for example, Indonesia. That's been one of the first investments. In Indonesia, we talk close to 300 million people. Most of them don't have a health insurance. Most of them don't have a credit card. And more than 50% approximately don't have a bank account. And we talk thousands of islands, little villages. So medical coverage with medical professionals is an issue. If you don't have an insurance, it's even worse. then you have to pay out of your own pocket. You know, in Indonesia, a severe accident can trigger a complete family crisis until to, so to say, family bankruptcy. So if you look at these needs and the pure mass of people, that's the interesting thing in Indonesia.
So you came to it from a demand perspective, but what was your rationale behind what strengths you can leverage in that market? Because, I mean, you have the famous right to play, right, type of an idea. Where did you feel you were bringing in an asset that would help you venturing into the B2C space?
Nothing much than money in the beginning. We then started to understand where our unfair advantage might be. It's one, resilient capital. We are not a closed-end fund, so we can be very patient. We do have now with the portfolio many talents who might be very helpful for one particular startup we invest in many aspects. Can be subject matter experts, can help for go-to-market, strategize, fundraising, whatever it might be. I think these are the two corners for unfair advantages.
Okay, very interesting. I think one item that I'd like to carve out a little bit more is, since you have started off in Europe, later on went into Asia, but you have built Asia really into at least one additional core of your overall business, if maybe nowadays even the larger core of your business. How strong has the connection between Europe and Asia been for you personally, but also how has this helped you and your business to further develop?
Oh, it's actually thanks to my father or parents that I'm Asia-based now, and that I made my way to Asia. My father and we are family business. I'm Gen 6. My children are Gen 7. I don't want to suggest that they're going to join the family business. Maybe we touched that topic too a little bit. My father is Gen 5. He's been the typical patriarch, nice person, very much socializing with everybody, but it had to go his direction, his viewpoint. He opened the first joint venture in 1982, 83 in Singapore.
Yeah, because the electronics market at that time, Asia made sense, right?
Yeah, that's the theory. You know, you see, okay, the markets, they open up there. Maybe you need to be there. But as a small family business SME, the company was not that big at that time. It was really a bold move to go find partners and build it together in an unknown territory, in an unknown culture. That's what made me actually getting intrigued by all the Asian cultures, what is different. And I was very lucky, you know, my father was then, half of the year he was gone in Asia, or even more, to build that joint venture. And yeah, we needed to see each other from time to time. So I think we spent all our holidays in Asia at that time. So over and over, I visited all the countries, and that built my curiosity. That's the private part. The corporate part, it's various aspects. Back in the 80s, it's been access to fantastic innovation in Japan as a differentiator for the German production. And then with the joint venture. And then we built upon it. So after the IPO in Germany, 1989, the second IPO was in Singapore.
Okay, so you had your first IPO in Germany and then later even in Singapore. You must have been one of the first, at least German-rooted businesses to IPO in Singapore, right?
Yeah, and it's been a small entity, you know, a typical SME, well below three-digit top line in millions. It's been one of the first ones actually at the Singapore Stock Exchange. Okay. The brand is still known until today, interestingly. Taxi drivers, if they see my family name, they say, "Oh, are you linked to Pentex Schweizer Circuits Limited? I once bought some shares of you guys."
Oh, that's funny.
That's really funny, isn't it?
I can imagine that those taxi drivers in Singapore are well informed.
They are, yeah.
I noticed that as well. Can you describe how you have leveraged the strengths of both regions for growing your business, for Asia and Europe?
It's also a very good question. You know, everybody will tell you we need to combine both of best, and then 1 + 1 is 3.
In theory.
in theory. That's not good enough. Germany always has been our core, and that's the who we are. What is that about now? The who we are is the purpose, it's our values, and it's the culture. These three pieces. Purpose, value, culture. That's the European essence. So now what are the Asian flavors into it? Yeah, it's not in Singapore laksa. Maybe some know what laksa is in Singapore. It's not durian or anything else. It's not a dish. The Asian angle is more how we operate. And here we pretty much copycatted what works in Asia. And it's also three aspects. The first one is radically flat. The second one is delegation of decision making. Let me first explain these two a little bit before I come to the third one. Radically flat is about a network of teams where a lot of digital tools enable would-be micromanagers. You always have would-be micromanagers in your organization to have a large span of direct reports with the digital tools and to develop from micromanagement or pseudo-micromanagement or would-be micromanagement to becoming coaches. And that's very, very flat, radically flat. So if you look at the org structure on the portfolio level and in most corporate entities, it's a network of teams.
And is that something that works traditionally well in Asia? How is this rooted in Asia from your point of view?
I think we have two types of org structures in Asia. The one is the very hierarchical one. That's the typical chimney effect. Most Japanese companies are like that because the Japanese culture is like that. Everything needs to be kind of evaluated, next level again, evaluate, agree, evaluate, up to the top.
So the chimney,
the
steam
chimney,
is going up.
the smoke is going up to the chimney. That takes some time. Not everything about it is bad. It's actually good because the entire organization is aligned. But the smoke goes up to the chimney, a decision is made, and then it needs to go down again. But if the decision is not according to the proposal of the smoke, so to say, you redo the next chimney. That's taking out of speed. That's the one type of organizations you see in Asia. The other ones, they are super agile, sometimes uncontrollable, unmanageable. I don't like the term control. Unmanageable. But the real good ones, it's a network of teams. Fast-paced decision-making. Super fast.
And delegation of decision-making.
Yeah, the second piece is delegation of decision-making, really to, ideally, the customer-facing employees. They know best. The customer are the only ones who can fire the CEO. If they don't buy, no money, CEO needs to go. And the third one is talent is more important than capital. It's about culture. You hear that everywhere. Talent is more important than capital. Yeah, well, but it's not very often attributed with Asia. But I think it's deeply rooted into the Asian culture. Look, if you start business with somebody, Asians will tell you, we need to get to know you. We need to have a relationship. You've lived many years in Asia. It's about building that trust. And that's the talent piece of it. So the people are more important than the capital.
Yeah, maybe due to that relationship-centric mindset that talent is just, thinking of talent rather than capital is just more intuitive maybe. But yeah, that's an interesting observation. I think to recap, I mean, it's the three elements, first of all, for Europe. I mean, I sort of paraphrase it. It's a little bit the soul of the business, right? So it's the purpose, it's the why, it's the mission, it's the vision, right? And it's the culture piece. So a lot about the why, and then the what and how. That's more defined by the Asian learnings. It's around agility, speed, delegation of decision making, and then talent over capital. Those three elements.
Yeah, that's just who we are, and that's due to our family business history. We've overcome quite a lot of changes. Everything started with cuckoo clocks. So we are cuckoo clock maker. So I'm the 6th generation cuckoo clock maker.
175 years ago, right?
Yeah, but we don't do cuckoo clocks anymore. And then the company always involved. If you now look who we are, that's the European part. How do we operate is more the Asian part. And now if you combine it, it ends up to how do we grow. And I think that's the important piece, because that's then the dish, the combination. And here again, 3. One is we embrace ecosystems. That's our progressive partnership approach. That's one. The second one is data is everybody's business. I'll come to that in a second. And the third one is learning everywhere.
So progressive partnerships, data is everyone's business, and the importance of learning on a continuous basis.
Yeah, and the fish stinks from the head. So if the C-level doesn't have enough time for their own learning, you cannot ask it to your entire organization, go and learn. It's basically a headline everybody is saying.
I also remember from one of our previous conversations that you have this 30, 30, 30, 10 rule, where you say like 30% of my time is actually invested into own learning and advancing, both professionally as well as from a knowledge standpoint. Then I think the other 30 was managing your day-to-day business as a portfolio investment company. And then the other 30% was...
That's on external mandates.
External mandates, right.
Which are not linked to our portfolio.
The board mandates.
Board mandates, advisory board mandates, mentorship mandates, coaching mandates, whatever it might be.
And what's the last 10%?
Inefficiency.
Okay.
Things go wrong.
Built-in inefficiency, so you have a buffer. Very good.
I have the 10% buffer, yeah. You did your math, right? It's a fantastic setup. It took quite a time to get there. First to build the concept, and then to gradually move to the 30-30-10.
How do you institutionalize this and nurture this in the portfolio? I mean, that's you as a professional first, of course, leadership by example, but apart from this, how do you nurture this in your portfolio with the entrepreneurs that you engage, making sure that the key people also embrace that value of learning on a continuous basis?
It's about workload and discipline. So you need to balance the workload to free that time to be able to do it. So the learning piece gets forgotten very often, typically. Busy schedule, horrible. Yeah, if I have time, I'll go on a learning journey. I register in a course, but I cancel because there's something more important that came up, like customer calls. Let me give you a very hands-on example, which has proven to work pretty well, but it has to do something with discipline. We only have 2 slots internally to answer on emails, internal emails. It's not a fixed slot for everybody at the same time. That would be ridiculous. But we agreed internally, 2 slots per day, you answer your internal emails. And in between, you don't. That's again about expectation management. Because nobody expects an immediate answer from a colleague on an internal email. Worst case, you have to wait half a day. That's calming down everything. This is really fantastic.
Oh, so that reserves time for deep work and focused work on
it's focused work, and that comes about discipline. So we wish that focus time is in the calendar and not compromised. Learning time is in the calendar, not compromised.
Wow. Excellent. Now, let's dive into the role of partnerships, and you call it progressive partnerships with other organizations. And I think you have quite a unique approach to this. Could you expand on this?
Yeah, maybe let me share a little bit the situation first and the overall arching aspect. So it's about ecosystems. Getting very popular these days. Everybody talks, we need to build ecosystems, work with this and that and this and that. Yes. But the question is the how and why. So let me share 2 examples of the situations. The first situation has been family business, 2005. We had a fire incident, 40 to 50% automotive exposure.
This was right before you started, right?
Yeah, that was my, so to say, welcome present, the unexpected welcome present. Well, things are as they are. In hindsight, it's been actually rather good for the company than bad. If you survive, everybody will tell that. I also do. So company fire situation. Let me come back to the situation. Company fire 2005, shutdown of the company, good insurance coverage. We had to fight back into the market, restructure the company. The story is very long. That's for another one. Made it back into the market, again profitable, again positive cash flow. It's been a tough exercise. From 800 employees down to 500, really tough restructuring. Luckily, I've been taught how to restructure with my French MNC experience. So it's been not the first trial and error. And just to give you a hint, maybe we want to talk about what you can transfer from piloting to restructuring companies. Maybe let's do that later. So, situation. Financial crisis, second top line drop by 50%.
Wow.
Already with a pretty weak balance sheet, all you could imagine. So we barely managed to organize the first restructuring and survived. And then this was just close to death.
So an existential crisis.
It was an existential crisis. So tactics then need to build a case that the banks continue with the credit lines. We had a banking pool at that time. Action, try to get access to capacity. Because the first restructuring success factor has been, beside automotive, enter into a fast-paced market, which was at that time renewable energies, inverter market.
For photovoltaic, right?
For the photovoltaic guys. The big names like SMA, most known, has been one of the big customers. They really helped us to pull us out of that very difficult situation. But they needed more capacity. We didn't have the money to build capacity. And there was no way on getting access to more capital at a stock exchange. The company was listed at that time because market cap was just not nice yet. And then that's the action, what to do. And that's where our progressive partnership approach was born, out of lack of alternatives, actually. It was not so strategic, if I'm honest with you. It was purely because we had to do something to survive.
Not that many options.
Yeah, I was probably the only one.
No. And that was then the first partnership, was it right, with the Japanese company, Mako?
It was with a Japanese company. I remember many months I've been going on roadshow in Asia, trying to find partners. Typically, all the partners have been competitors, 10 times bigger than we have been at that time, already eating up our own market, selling to our key accounts. That's been the setting. No way around. You couldn't find a potential partner who's not already attacking you in your home turf. That didn't exist.
But your key asset was still that strong access to your customer base, that trusted brand for your type of customer base that you served.
Yeah, it's been the customer access. It's been the family business brand, I think, mostly. Old business that had good times, bad times, more bad times than good times. And that led to some shortlisting in Japan due to cultural similarities.
Which in that case is also a family business, but stock listed but much larger as well then.
Yeah, at that time they've been 10x bigger. Chestec listed already. Not that old. The company is called Microelectronics. They've been incorporated 1972. At that time, the founder, president, CEO, in Japanese Chacho, has been running the show in his late 60s, close to his early 70s. And we partnered up.
Okay.
Biggest competitor. Had to explain that to the shareholders, to the family, to the supervisory board mainly.
And the banks, maybe.
Yeah, that's been then the case to build the case together with the partner on a growth path to make them understand, yeah, this is a feasible way, but we need to have the contracts in place before proposing it to the bank. So that's when the progressive partnership model has been born, out of pressure of survival.
Now, I remember you have also other other partnerships? I mean, this with Mako has been the first, right? But I also remember you have partnerships with companies like Infineon, which serve a different purpose, right? And they also have a different rationale on how they came about. Maybe you can speak to that as well.
Yeah, that's in a complete different situation. But let me maybe close up first the Mako Electronics partnership. And that's the progressive piece of the partnership. What you see in building partnerships, very often it's over-engineered. And that's my personal opinion. And that's maybe the challenge of the German culture. You want to have scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3, whatever might happen, already somehow in an agreement. That makes us feel comfortable, Europeans, Germans.
Yeah.
And as you know, I'm German, just living in Asia. This is tricky. And it's not progressive. Progressive is step 1, get to know each other. If it works, go step 2. If it works even better, go step 3. And keep it very simple. That would be my learning and my recommendation out of the first partnership exercise. And by coincidence, more or less, we agreed on a threefold approach because our Japanese partner didn't want to go into a capital link or any joint venture in the beginning. They just said we need to see and wait. That's been the Japanese way of thinking. And that's why it was first, we get access to their capacities, they get access to our markets. If this works well, then we exchange capital. And then later on, we build a joint venture together.
Oh, so this concept of progressive was actually introduced by your Japanese partner.
Yeah, because they refused to go full-fledged with us because they thought like, okay, they're a little bit ill. They're just out of ICU. Now they are just still in hospital. We don't know if they will survive or go graveyard. And we don't want to have any impact on our company. I think that was the rationale when we talk later on about it. Okay, the more loose one feels more comfortable and was negotiable with them. And then after this had worked and we walked our talk, then we started the next one and so forth. And that became a concept later on. We duplicated. Now Infineon.
Yeah, so, but to recap before, I mean, to essentially start simple, but then also get it going. Don't try to prevent or preempt any scenario that could evolve. So to approach it too much from a risk management perspective, but just get started, but in a simple design, and then progressively add more to it, including capital investment, including joint venture at a later stage.
That's nicely phrased, yeah. Multi-step approach, multi-level approach, keep it simple and focus on doing. And that's also the ecosystem approach. But that requires that you have very open boundaries between the companies. It needs to be open. It's less control, it's more manage. And family businesses have problems not to control, I can tell you.
There I would be curious, because I'm trying to visualize this from a leadership standpoint. Now, you were CEO of Schweizer Electronics at that time, right? And your counterpart was that the patriarch, or was that already second generation?
No, first gen founder. Very
so basically
successful.
the patriarch of the Japanese stock listed business.
At the age of my father, more or less.
Ah, okay. How did that work? Because also for him, this must have been a new experience, having a substantially younger female leader, or also non-Japanese. I mean, diversity from multiple perspectives, right? How did that go about? I mean, if things were escalated, did this happen on a CEO by CEO basis? How did you navigate issues and problems between the two businesses?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it began with one unfair advantage we had. At that time, there have been a lot of semiconductor talents on the market, 2008, 2009, out of Qimonda bankruptcy. That's been the memory business. Maybe you remember.
I remember
that one.
The brand.
And as there have been a lot of talents available on the market, some of top talents joined Schweizer. They would have never joined Schweizer if the market would have been a solid, hard market for talent. And the sales director of Schweizer used to be in the semiconductor industry assigned to Japan. So I had this asset. And as we talk now, I recall really our first meetings with the Japanese team. If I wouldn't have had him, knowing exactly which button to press to make them start even open their mind to have a talk with me.
Oh, so you had
Because
a
I was
very,
the only one. I was young, family business, rotten, Germany, small. Looked nice, but not very attractive actually, from a business perspective, you know?
so you had a very effective sort of a counterpart in Japan who joined you and who served as the, cultural interpreter, but also...
Yeah, by accident. Yeah, he was the sales director of Schweizer Electronic at that time, and he helped me actually to kick this off. And then, I had conversations with the CEO Chacho about it a lot. He just said, I think I just like that you were not just like kind of trying to cover up your messy situation. You told me I'm close to death. Sorry, in a closed job.
So you were transparent.
I think that was the key to open his heart. For sure, there was also something we could offer. We had access to markets where they struggled. So there was an expectation with it too.
Interesting.
It was not philanthropy from his side. Definitely not.
Yeah, but there was this trust-building moment, and then from there, on which the relationship then could evolve and build on. Great. Now moving to Infineon, that had a different rationale and context to it.
Yeah, situation very different. So Schweizer Electronic at that time, highly exposed to automotive industry, focus on two driving market forces. One, power electronics. That's all about new energy vehicles. So that's the battery electric, that's the hybrids, the plug-in hybrids. And autonomous driving. These have been the market drivers in the automotive sector. So now power electronics. The situation has been as follows. We've seen that going forward, you need to take the semiconductors, which are typically on top and on bottom of a PCB. PCB is the green thing, the interconnect device. For various reasons, you need to sync different application setup, embed them into the PCB. Increased performance, smaller size, less weight, which is also critical in any electric car, and the most important factor, cost down. So we've seen that. That's the situation. So if you think about it, then two parallel industries, PCB and semiconductor industries, are selling to tier ones in the automotive industry. That's typically how the supply chain looks like. If these two industries would merge, we doubted that we could survive. The semicons have the bigger pockets. They will probably consolidate actively take over the PCB market. That's been at least a rational at that time, worst case scenario. So that's the situation. A lot of opportunities, but a lot of threats to come with. We've seen that this could be a growth path for the firm. Our Gary Gearloose had great ideas, patented a lot of technologies for embedding. And then the next partnership approach has been developed. First, co-development partnership with Infineon. We pitched to many power semiconductor companies at that time, selected Infineon for good reasons, and then developed this partnership into an equity participation a little later in 2014. So Infineon became anchor investor of Schweizer Electronic at that time. You might want to ask me now, what for that? Why?
The rationale, right.
The rationale for us was for the equity participation. Simply put, it's sitting on the shoulders of a giant you see further. And nobody will believe you, and it's really tough as a small company to build a new market and convince the entire auto supply chain to go for this new technology. So without a powerhouse like Infineon, I doubt that you can be successful.
So it was actually not about the capital, but more about standing on the shoulders of a giant, like also having that brand, that credibility.
It's been about credibility. Yeah. It couldn't be that bad, this technology, when Infineon invested into it, isn't it?
Right. Very interesting. And that progressive element, how did this also reflect in that partnership?
Co-development first, convince the partner,
And
then
add
capital,
at
then
a later
capital
stage.
participation.
So similar rationale.
It's a twofold. It's been a twofold approach.
Okay.
We embrace the ecosystems. That's the progressive partnership scheme with very porous boundaries. It's a lot about managing versus controlling, giving more than you take in the beginning, but still focusing on the unique value of the partners. So it's not a potpourri or a mix of both. It still remains particularly separate with porous boundaries. That's the ecosystem part. Then the second one is data is everybody's business. That's also important, especially if using digital transformation and so forth. Yeah, data is everybody's business. You know, it's not a department that's taking care of the data. It's not only about tools who provide data, it's embracing data in your daily work. We have very prominent examples now. All Gen AI, all these kind of tools are just a little snippet of it. But even before then, data is everybody's business. So it's not the business of a department. It's not the business of a CIO. It's not only the business of a transformation department. We are all working with our data and work with it. That's about it, in short. And then the last one is the lifelong learning piece. That's the third pillar.
Can you describe your approach on how you manage the group's portfolio and explain the rationale behind it? Maybe before we do that, we take a step back even to understand your portfolio a little bit better. Would you mind sort of providing a bit more context to your group, your portfolio, a little bit the consistency of it, and then we go from there into looking at your approach on how you manage the group's portfolio.
Yeah, happy to do that. You know, today we are 34. We could have been 36. We have two failures in venture capital. To make me feel better, I'd like to call it philanthropy. We are a group of 34. Very different types of companies. It's in three sectors. It's manufacturing, electronics manufacturing, basically. Then it's in mobility and in digital platforms. And digital platforms has many, many subsectors, from B2C to B2B to deep tech advanced manufacturing, closer or further away from the electronics core business. So it's 34. In total, if I do the math, we don't consolidate for sure. We talk 4+ billion turnover.
US dollar, euro.
It's all USD.
$4 billion in revenue.
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
And 24,000+ talents.
Okay. And of which, from the more mature businesses, 4 even stock-listed businesses.
Yeah, 4 public companies.
Yeah.
2 are above 1 billion, all top line USD. Another 2 are between 250 and 1 billion. Then I have 15 in the portfolio between 100 to 250 million. And if you do the math, there are 15 left. It's below 100 million. From very small, very early stage to a little bit more mature.
Okay. And then on the digital, you mentioned B2B to B2C. And I remember even companies in the telemedicine, in the payment space as well, with the focus on Asia, right?
Yeah, that's been our trial error that's been learning actually, the learning piece, you know. We thought like the underlying market drivers are there. That one we understood. We didn't have any brand in the venture capital environment in Asia Pacific, in particular in ASEAN. So joining forces with established VCs, buying into these markets, starting to understand them, and build a B2C investment thesis out of it. That's how we came into B2C. Not so obvious for a B2B player. I'm also a B2B animal all my life.
Yeah, I can imagine. Takes actually a bit of courage to get from there into the B2C space, right? But then grow with the learnings. Quite insightful. Thanks. Now I'd like to move to my last topic, which is essentially your approach on how you manage the group's business or the portfolio investment business nowadays, since I believe there's different learnings in that that are also interesting for our audience. So can you describe your approach on how you manage the group's portfolio and explain the rationale behind it?
Yeah, I think we touched it a little bit already. You know, it's the problem is a threefold of competing rationals behind it: money, family beliefs, and the mandate.
And I remember you had a very catchy term. You called it the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah,
right?
because most ships sink in the Bermuda, right? So you have to make sure that you don't sink. So, so money, family, mandate. The family piece in family-owned and managed businesses versus not family-managed but family-owned business is a different topic. Now I'm talking about partially family-managed businesses plus money plus mandate. Which one shall we start with?
Yeah, start with the family piece first, since this also speaks to how a contemporary family office type of a business can be operated and run.
Yeah, you know, the family piece, that's about intentions, emotions, ego, credibility. Which child is the superstar? Which child is the black sheep in the family? How much I feel comfortable with going big, losing control, rather go into a manage mode, give more than win. All these aspects come into play into in the family piece.
So a mix between private intentions, maybe more rational, but also emotional and partly irrational elements that come into play.
Okay, let me give you an example. Okay, if you work for your family business in a senior executive position, if you get your salary from it, if you have the majority of your wealth in the family business, you have everything in the family business, right? So some wish not to take too much risks because they just feel happy with their salary, which might be very attractive. They have a nice pension scheme. That's just a comfortable situation. Maybe then the company is dividend yielding, quite okayish. That's good. Versus, others, also in the family business, think very differently. Maybe they have other assets that have been built over time. So the family business is then one of their portfolio investments. One. And not everything. Maybe they are not so dependent on having a job in the family firm. Because they are thinking of maybe I exit the family firm, work for another one, worked already for another company, or build a career outside the family business. This is that family aspect.
Okay.
And now I come to the money aspect. And that's somehow linked, you know? Those who only have the family business as their main asset tend not to be able to take a lot of risks on growth. If you look at the PCB industry, I would want to argue minimum size of a company is probably 500 to 600 million these days.
So critical mass.
Yeah, for various reasons. Not only economy of scale, there are many others. So now the money piece is the tricky one, especially if you have external shareholders, probably private capital, private equity in it. And that's also a lesson learned from some of our portfolio companies where we had these problems.
So they have different risk appetite, but also different time horizons attached to it.
Time horizons, risk appetite. And you need to align them openly from the beginning. What I see with many family businesses, first outside investors, might be private equity, might be other family businesses who have a portfolio, they come in for sure. And I don't want to judge it, it's just a pretty normal approach. They need to make sure that the company is growing, maybe to a minimum size the market requires. And logically, they are ready to take more risks. If they lose this one asset due to insolvency, fine. Maybe 5 others work very well, they are well off. If you have family members who have everything in their only family business, they will lose everything what they have. And then the tricky part starts. over time, especially if things go wrong. And now the most important one actually is the mandate piece, how we run the portfolio. The headline is never compromise. I've learned my hard lessons on that.
To not compromise on the deadlines? Or
No, on the mandate.
On the mandate.
On the mandate. There's a lot of research out there, and most CVCs, corporate venture capital, and somehow we are an entrepreneurial family office, EFO, not a typical SFO, single family office or MFO. Because we like to build companies.
More active.
We like to invest companies. We like to be actively involved in combining, growing, and selling them. So that's very entrepreneurial. We are not asset managers. So in this context, we are similar to a CVC, or so to want to be CVC. And many CVCs fail for various reasons. And the core is unclear mandate. It's very general, right? So now, how did we structure that? And that's my lessons learned. We have two mandates at the same time. We have a financial mandate, how we call it, and then we have a strategic mandate. Let me explain that to you. The financial mandate, we are purely acting as if we were, for early stage startups or late stage startups, as a venture capital firm. For private equity deals, we are acting as if we were a private equity house. So typically think exit, think multiple, and this is the only pathway. For sure, you end up in discussions, oh yeah, there might be a synergy with another portfolio company. Yeah, maybe. It's not part of our business rationale, and we don't want to make it happen. Because a purely financial mandate is to grow the company independently, to have a good multiple, 4, 5, 6, 7. We are currently at 8x. In average on our portfolio, yeah, you need a couple of dragons shooting stars, then you're at 8x. It's not rocket science. So, but only this. Or we go in strategic. Basically, then it's one portfolio company who needs help to find new solutions. Horizon 2, Horizon 3, very often. Then we get a mandate, we go scouting, find interesting startups, validate them. So we is the portfolio company and the entrepreneurial family office. We validate and then they invest. But then the only rationale behind it is to make this corporate who gave us the mandate to scout, invest into a venture, or even build it. Sometimes you build it from scratch. It's only for the benefit of the corporate. And you need to talk with the startup exactly like that. Look, guys, we are a strategic investor. One day, if things go well, we want to buy you.
Okay. I mean, that's the backdrop, essentially the Bermuda Triangle, right? So the money, then the private intentions of the family members in your case, or in the case of a family office. And then the third piece is the mandate, strategic versus financial. Now, how do you reconcile this? So what's your approach on reconciling this and making your portfolio effective? I remember you had a three-pronged approach on how you go about this. Can you expand on this?
It starts with expectation management. I touched on that already a little bit. Secondly, never compromise. Really never compromise. And focus only on your unfair advantage and make sure that it doesn't turn into an unfair disadvantage, which easily happens.
Can you expand on that?
Look, typically what happens if you have a portfolio of companies, I'd like to call it fantastic zoo. We have giraffes, we have hippos, we have some smaller ones, bunnies, we have some ants, and we also have crocodiles.
And some unicorns.
Looks like, yeah. So this zoo likes to get help from the other animal. That's a pretty normal trait. Especially, and let me give you an example. We are investing heavily into deep tech B2B startups. It's all about digital industrial transformation, and these days AI agents for manufacturing in the electronics industry. For sure, it's purely financial mandate. But a startup will see the other portfolio companies of us. And logically, they will knock at the door and, hey, can you please help? This is a perfect client to gain credibility in the market. Why don't they buy our products? Why don't they pay the POC? And this is the tricky part. And that's the never compromise part here. Because venture clienting only works if it's only for venture clienting without investment.
Okay, so in that case, you would not encourage for the startups to work with the more mature corporates in your portfolio.
No, I wouldn't compromise. If the product is fantastic, and that comes back to the delegation of decision making, I would never push a portfolio company to buy a product of another portfolio company for whatever reasons. Let them decide. If the product is fantastic, fair enough. Then they have a business relationship, but I'll not safeguard this business relationship if the startup or the other party doesn't feel comfortable anymore, if the value proposition is not a walk and talk value proposition.
Okay.
Then it ends.
Oh. Okay, no, that makes sense.
And that's really tricky to manage, because startups don't understand if I say, okay, I don't open you the door to one of the corporates.
Oh. Okay, which I understand is anyways something that when you set expectations, which is one of the key pillars, right? This would have been something that they have already heard somewhere earlier in the relationship, right?
Yeah, but this is not very common in the VC space, Venture capital is very much, maybe you didn't convince me, now I talk investment. Let's talk later. Keep me informed. It's never a real clear no or expectation. That's how the market has been built. It's not good and bad, it's just as it is. So startups are sometimes not used to clear messages. And I strongly believe in it.
Okay. So to recap, setting a clear mandate, so it's either strategic or financial.
Very
it's not
important.
both of it. Then second, setting expectations early on. And then last but not least, never compromise on the principles on which you operate.
I couldn't have summarized it better than you did now. And keep in mind, CVCs very often also fail because the C-level does not consider the CVC activities as radical innovation. That's very often the root cause. You cannot measure ROI quickly. It's not a stage gate process you can run. It requires maybe a lot of money, especially in B2B deep tech, for 8, 12. It's not 8, it's more maybe 12 to 20 years commitment into one direction. Start, stop, waste of money. And it's difficult for many C-levels actually to understand, to get the stakeholders aligned. And with changes of CEOs, we know the turnover rate. Sometimes just the picture changes.
So they actually don't have the time horizon to really think horizon 2 or horizon 3.
Yeah, that would be the easy answer, but it's also about expectation management. I see a lot of cases out there where many corporates promise to their talent base, this is the future. That's nicely said. We now set up a CVC, we put in whatever, 50 million, 100 million, we buy a couple of startups. We invest in them, maybe we do venture building and build them. Over time, follow in the rounds and maybe also buy them at a higher valuation. That's already difficult for family businesses. You build a startup and then you buy it at a high price tag. I have examples for that.
Yeah, maybe could you expand on one of the examples?
An example, I cannot tell you the name, but we had spent 10 millions into that startup over time, several rounds. And then one of the portfolio companies was interested to buy it. The rationale has been, Oh, we pay 12 million. That's a 20%. That's a 20% top up. That's how they call it. Forget about it. This startup was 10x is necessary to buy it. That's where one mismatch is. The other one is if you say the startups are our future, and very often it takes longer, or it just doesn't work out. That's what venture capital is about. I don't need to convince anybody here in the audience. 95% fail. That's part of the business. So that's not your future. So if then the corporate is in a difficult situation, maybe a restructuring situation, very often with that promise that the startup world is our future, if that didn't materialize well enough, they stop the CVC. And that's actually a pity from a strategic point of view. And it's happening a lot in Germany.
Currently happening a lot. So change of priorities, and then these activities get frozen or at least downsized to a meaningless sort of a scale.
Yeah, you have to. You know, if you're running restructuring and you're reducing headcount, and you need to align with all stakeholders, including the representatives of your employees, for sure, they may just say, okay, guys, you told me that this is the future. It didn't turn out. We don't want to spend money anymore. And then it's a compromise. Negotiations.
I see that a lot as well.
Yeah.
Now, you have mentioned it already, your work as an advisory board or governance board member, and that's, I know you're quite passionate about that line of work, and I think also an interesting topic also for our audience, which I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into. I know you're a proponent of a strong distinguishing between a governance board versus an advisory board. Maybe you can expand a little bit on your view on both these models, and also particularly for an advisory board, where you see the success factors in today's day and age on how to really make this an effective model.
Okay, let's go to the theory first. Governance board is a decision-making body. In one board or two board system, it's pretty much the same. You give guidance and you approve topics that the executives then execute. Simply put. While advisory boards are think tanks. Ideally, it's a group of people with very diverse views who debate. So you have to think really strong debate culture with no fashion show. And that's why, in most cases, it's not a so fantastic idea to have investors be in the advisory board, especially for startups. It's pretty obvious. The executives, they will tend to do fashion show. If the investors are sitting in the advisory board, you hear the good things, you don't hear so much the challenges, and I've seen it over and over and over. So proper board setup, it's better to have the investors on the governance board or as board observers ideally, and the advisory board, keep it safeguarded with the right people on board with no conflict of interest. Then it's very helpful, and it's not consultancy. That's also an important aspect we need to keep into mind. An advisory board is not a consultancy. Consultancy, analyze, simplify, come up with options, potentially help to execute. That's not an advisory board. No advisory board, the advisors, they don't end the meeting with a to-do list. It's the executives who have the to-do list. They just bring the input.
So it's a sparring partner.
It is. I like to call it think tank. And let me share something with you, what I see in the market now. Many large corporates, they start to embrace the value of advisory boards. Mostly it's project advisory boards. For a period of up to 18 months. May it be a go-to-market, may it be stakeholder engagement. And I think there are two values. First, the governance board needs to make informed decisions. We all know that. In a more complex world, it's difficult to be able to do so. We don't want to touch the governance board too often. We don't want to have monster governance boards. Neither. They are costly, they are inefficient. Sometimes offboarding a governance board member has impacts on your market cap. So you need to keep that pretty stable. But you might need different aspects for the informed decision that you cannot have in the governance board. So that's where the power of advisory boards comes into place. And many corporates, they embrace it. They build advisory boards for specific topics for exactly this purpose and value.
Oh, very interesting. I like that idea of having something that is sort of encapsulated and time constrained, let's say, like you call it the project-based advisory board around a certain topic, around a certain initiative. Do you see there is also a role for something like this for more mid-caps? And I mean, particularly if I look at the landscape of advisory boards in Germany, my sense is the maturity of those and the professionalism of those is still, in many organizations, a little questionable. But I think it's, from my point of view, quite an effective tool, right? But do you see also a role of these project-based advisory boards for instance, some mid-caps in Germany, particularly the ones that are internationally more active?
Definitely, absolutely. It doesn't matter so much of the size of the company. I think there are a couple of key success factors to set up a impactful advisory board. First, you need to identify what the company really needs. To set up an advisory board, just to have an advisory board is nonsense. What does the company need? And that's the question of stage of challenges. If it's more internationalization, it's typically a go-to-market. Then this is the core of the need of the company. Especially for many mid-cap companies, SMEs in Germany, it's typically a go-to-market topic. Very often it's an organizational development topic. Sometimes it's also a question of the tech construction set, just to name three of many. So first, identify what the company really needs. Then, build the objectives for an advisory board. What are the key objectives and key results the advisory board should deliver? And then in the third step, think about who should be in the advisory board. As a rule of thumb, typically impactful advisory boards have 2 executives in the advisory board, 2 senior leaders. Very often it's the CEO plus somebody, plus a chair of the advisory board. The chair has not only the role of being one of the think tank members, the chair also needs to ensure that the objective key results are met, that the other advisors contribute as agreed upon, and the chair also acts as a mentor for the executives in between the formal advisory board meetings. So the need, the objectives, then the staffing, including expectation management, because a good advisory board has a yearly impact review, and if the advisors don't contribute for whatever reason, it's offboarding and exchange. And then only you bring it into action. Typically, it's 4 to 6 formal meetings a year, 2 to 3 hours, half day.
If you have a project-driven board, anyways, it's time constrained, so you don't have the inconvenience of having to offboard anyone because it's, let's say, after 1.5 years, you might move on building a new board, advisory board for a new topic, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, great. Maren, this has been super insightful. I very much enjoyed our conversation and look forward actually to continuing that conversation, be it either here in Munich, in Singapore, or elsewhere in the world. And would like to thank you for taking your time for today's session.
Yeah, very welcome. The pleasure was mine. I was just thinking when you mentioned Germany or Singapore, maybe we can do it on board of an airline somewhere.
Only if you are flying.
I'm
or
still,
better not.
I'm still flying. So maybe if you only remember one thing about me, it's from pilot to piloting businesses.
Oh,
thanks for having me.
From pilot to piloting a business. I like that. Thanks, Maren. Much appreciated. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of AUSLAND, Leaders Beyond Borders. And we would like to welcome you also to our next session. And please do not forget to subscribe. Thank you. Bye-bye.